We ready? How old are you, Miss Glass?
I'm 101.
When do you turn 102?
July the 22nd of this year.
Yeah. I'm a July baby, too.
Good.
Okay. Do you have enough, or do you want us to start with
keep
the
going.
interview?
Sure.
Do you want us to start for real now?
Yes.
Or okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Ms. Glass, and letting us come into your home and talk to you and ask about a life of voting and activism and caring about your community. So the first question I want to ask you again is where you were born, how old you are, and how long you've lived in Louisville.
I was born in Bessemer, Alabama, Jefferson County. Bessemer was a thriving little steel mill town. And the town was so beautiful, but they took the steel mill out of the country. And when they took the steel mill out, Bessemer began to go down, and we had problems.
Now, you were born 101 years ago,
Yes, ma'am, 101 years.
and you came to Kentucky to go to college, right?
I came to Kentucky in 1935 to go to Kentucky State College,
And what did you study there?
home economics and nursing.
And when did you move to Louisville?
After the 36 flood.
So you weren't here for the flood.
No, I was up in the mountains.
Do you remember, we're here to talk to you about voting and the importance of voting in your life and everybody's life. Do you remember your first vote?
It was when John F. Kennedy became president. I worked thoroughly in his campaign.
Do you remember any difficulties you had in trying to register to vote, either in Alabama or in Kentucky?
No, I didn't have any problems. Other friends and neighbors had problems, but I didn't have any problems.
Yeah. What did they tell you? What do you remember them telling you about their difficulties?
Well, most of them was turned around. I told them they had to read and write and do so many things that they couldn't do.
How did that make you feel when you heard those stories? And were those both in Alabama and Kentucky?
Yes, both. It was difficult in both places. Then we began the registration here in Kentucky. We had groups together. We were called different things, but primarily I worked with the Black Women for Political Action. And we gave lots of campaigning and lots of party to raise money.
And what years were those? And how did you become a member of that particular group?
I can't remember. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, that's all right. It was the 1950s or the 1960s, do you think?
I was a member of from 1950.
And you were also, you and your sister, and her name was Willa? Willa. You all were two of the first African American nurses in in Louisville, weren't you?
In Louisville, Kentucky. She came from Texas, and I came from Alabama.
And what was that like, being sort of a pioneer here in nursing for African American women?
It wasn't easy. We had jobs that was difficult. They gave us all the dirty work. During that time, all of the hospitals were segregated, and we had to do the dirty work.
What do you mean by the dirty work?
They gave us the wards that was poor and unkept, and where they needed most help. They said I was very good with working with my men. They always called me when they were short of help on the black men ward, needed help. They sent Evelyn, because I was kind and considerate.
Would the white nurses not work with the black men in that ward?
Well, it wasn't that they wouldn't work, but they were short of help all the time. And I was equally. I worked well with the men.
How about your sister?
She was timid and easy. She worked with the children and the babies, primarily on the baby ward.
So did anybody describe you as timid?
No,
How would you think you were described?
they said I knew how to carry myself, and I got along with everybody, especially with the men, where the other girls complained about the men touching them or saying something to them. That never bothered me.
But I bet you didn't take anything from anybody, did you? Any kind of guff or anything?
No. The Jewish, from the General Hospital opened up their first rehabilitating ward. They were to rehabilitate primarily the minors, and they came with broken limbs, and it required a lot of work, heavy work, and knowing how to use the equipment to take care of them.
Well, it sounds like between your friends having difficulty registering to vote and you and your sister being given what you called the dirty work at the hospital, that you knew that there were problems in society, and that, I mean, you worked as a nurse to show there was no difference. What did you do outside of work to try to address the inequalities that you experienced and your friends experienced?
I think primarily going to places where they didn't or would not serve blacks. I often went to different tea rooms, the lunch rooms down on 4th Street, where they wouldn't accept blacks. And off time I took my children, and I did this at a number of places. One in particular was Fifth Avenue Cabin. It was on the corner of Fifth Coffee Shop on the corner of Fifth Avenue, where they refused to serve the other people. And we had quite a disturbance, and the police came, and they put me in jail for an overnight stay.
Were you expecting to be arrested?
No,
Were you afraid?
no. I wasn't afraid until I got there. And then I called home for help, and my husband immediately came and got me out.
So did you spend the night in jail?
Only 1 or 2 times.
So you went back. Going to jail did not thwart your enthusiasm for protest.
it didn't stop me. I had a real big discussion and a turnout at the Blue Bowl cafeteria. It was the biggest lunchroom, biggest cafeteria in Louisville, where I had gone for lunch and was able to go around the counter and get my food with my children and had no problems. At this particular day, they refused. And they wanted to close the doors to keep the rest of them out. But we had a large gathering because we had planned, and they came to come in, but they closed the door on them and wouldn't let them in. And that's where we had problems, because I was already in and had been in, but they wouldn't let them. This was a gathered group that we had planned. They wouldn't let them in.
So did you end up going to jail that time too?
It was a big setup. They had closed down 4th Street, and they put everybody that was outside. We had any number of children, young people, and older people on the outside to come in, and they wouldn't let them in. And they were outside singing,
What were they singing?
"We shall overcome."
And you took your children with you on more than one occasion. Why was that important for you to take your kids?
To let them see that what was going on.
What did you want them to learn from what they were seeing and experiencing?
I was trying to teach them how to be kind and considerate of everybody, and that everybody should be treated alike, especially when they wanted service. And they were willing to pay, but they wouldn't accept them.
At the time all of that was happening, Ms. Glass, did you feel as if what you were doing and the difficulties that you were experiencing and going and protesting and being arrested and being treated the way you were, did you feel as if you were doing any good? And did you feel that things would ever change as this was happening?
Not at first. I didn't feel like I was being treated fair, and that I couldn't bring my friends along with me and be treated kindly, and even told, to get out, that we don't serve. That made me feel horrible, but it didn't stop me from going back.
What kept you going?
The determination to break down the stereotype, the meanness and the ugliness in the companies that was there.
For those of us who've never experienced that and who were either not born when that was going on or were too young to know what that felt like, hearing you talk about it is just so sad and terrible. Did you ever figure out why people had those attitudes and why they expressed them to people who only had a different color of skin?
No, it really didn't. Even when they came back from service, they were not accepted. And some of my brothers were bringing their companies, and they wouldn't accept them.
And they'd been fighting for their country. They'd worn the uniform of the United States.
On, and they refused to serve them, even with the uniforms on.
When you asked yourself why, did you come up with any answer?
No, because my brother had learned several languages, and when they protest, he would speak up for the group, and they treated them all alike. You can't sit here. We don't serve your kind. And he would ask them what kind they were thinking about. But even at some stations going further from Bessemer, between Bessemer and Tuscaloosa, they had signs, read, nigger, and run. And like, don't drink here. You couldn't even use the outside fountains.
It's very difficult to hear these things. I can't even imagine what it was like to live through them and to have to deal with them. When the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, did you feel hopeful? Did you think this was going to make any difference, or did you think, we've heard this kind of thing before and nothing's going to change? How did you react to that?
I think I felt good and had a feeling that things were going to be a little better, because then some of the same places where I'd been before, they had opened their counters up, and they were beginning to accept the people. So I've had the desire to keep on working so that we would open up the other stations down on 4th Street.
So you felt, so you kept voting and you kept protesting and you kept pushing for change.
Yeah, I kept on working. And even when they thought, I don't know why, but the word got back to my supervisors at General that I was working in the protest, and I wasn't wearing my uniform when I would go out, but nevertheless they thought that I should be reprimanded. So I got fired from General.
Did you really?
They had a conference, but they fired me. And I had been out protesting truly, so I couldn't say that I didn't. But I wasn't wearing my uniform when I went out. Mm-hmm. But I left and they transferred me down to the Memorial Hospital in Portland.
So you lost your job at General Hospital.
Big hospital, at Old General Hospital. I was fired.
And so what did you protest that? Was there anything you could do to get your job back?
No, wasn't nothing. We had a conference, but they did let me go to the Memorial Hospital.
And what kind of nursing did you do there? What kind of job did you have there?
Floor nursing.
Was that the same as what you had done at General?
Same thing, at doing heavy duty nursing.
Why do you think they wanted you out of General Hospital? Did they want to move you from downtown?
No, they just I don't think they wanted me particular from downtown.
So you got fired because you protested. How do you feel about that now?
Strange. Strange sitting here talking about it. Makes me feel horrible.
Did they give you any reason?
Oh, we fought. We had all kinds of meetings, but it didn't do any good. But nevertheless, they didn't keep me from being hired, transferred more or less down to the Memorial Hospital, because there was a great need for nurses and they couldn't hardly do without. So they just transferred me down to Memorial.
I didn't know you'd lost a job over this.
Yeah.
Well, your son told me about you all trying to integrate Fountain Ferry. And would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, that was horrible. Again, it was a group that was put together to go to Fountain Ferry. And we were there trying to get in. And they wouldn't let us in. We had a bunch of children, and I had my 2 children with me. It was hot, and everybody was crying, but my sister called her son and told him to go down there and get the children. So he came and grabbed the children out of the line, and they took me downtown.
So you were arrested again?
Yeah.
And how many times did you take part in protesting at that amusement park, which was in your own neighborhood? It was for whites only, but it was in your neighborhood.
Several times. I don't remember the number of times. But I was arrested that particular time.
What part of your life and how big a part of your life was using your voice, whether it came in exercising your right to vote or in protesting things that you thought weren't right and that you wanted to change? How big a part of your life is that, Ms. Glass?
That was a very active time in my life. I was young and strong, and I didn't mind getting up going. So they would call me sometimes late at night, out the campaign managers that was planning to go, and immediately I would go. I didn't do it alone. There were others who had planned.
Do you think people alive now, young people alive now, have any idea of what it took to open doors and to open lunch counters?
No, they don't have any idea of what we went through. And it hurts when you see them misusing the rights, acting ugly. I tried to teach my children to respect the rights of others, and even the buildings and the companies, they had the right to say no, but they shouldn't be mean.
What lessons from your life would you like to share with younger people who might see this interview with you?
What I would like to share:
What lessons?
patience, primarily, and respect. You don't have to love a person or the company, but you have to be patient and give them the respect they need and wait until that particular phase of that passes over.
Do you vote in every election now?
He most certainly, rain, sleet, or snow, I'm out.
Why is that?
Because I'm determined to keep going and keep showing that it was worth it.
Do you go to the poll, or do you do absentee, or do you do it by, or do you like to go to the poll?
I go to the polls. I never worked the polls, but I worked with a group in organizing different sections and different events.
You know, about 2/3 of people who are registered to vote don't vote. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I don't understand it, and I think it's horrible that I don't let their feelings. I pray that it's not a rainy day. They can't use that for an excuse.
Well, what would, if you could just say something to them that might persuade them that they need to vote, what would you tell them?
I think I would tell them that they just wasting our energies instead of pushing to help. But they should get up and try no matter how hard it is, because it wasn't easy for us.
Well, that's wonderful. Is there anything that you would like to say that I haven't asked you about?
Yeah. The worst thing I think could remember was when my brother came back from service. He and a couple other of their friends, I took them downtown for lunch, and we were refused. Like I said, they called them black boys, and that really hurt. I could sit down, but they couldn't, because they didn't know what I was.
So they thought you
And
were
it
white.
didn't matter.
They thought you were white?
I said some points and times they did.
So they wouldn't let your brother sit, but they let you sit.
He and his friends. And he would speak for his friends because he had learned several languages, and he never argued, but he taught.
Miss Glass, when these things happened to you, I mean, how did you personally react to those? Were you angry? Did you cry? How did you react to that?
I don't think I was angry, but I was hurt so much so I did cry quite a bit. I cried a lot.
Did you cry where the people who tormented you could see you, or did you cry at home?
No, I cried on the scene when they would refuse. I would be there pushing for them to get in.
And there's no way to measure how many tears you shed. Did you ever see your brother cry?
No, and I think he was more angry than me because
Well, was there something that happened where you felt in your lifetime, finally, we achieved what we were trying to achieve? Was there one thing, or are we not there yet?
no, I never felt that we had really accomplished everything we needed, but that we were marching on slowly but surely. One thing or another was happening. This store was opening, and then the next one down the street did the same thing.
But it sounds like you're saying that there are more doors that still need to be opened.
Yes.
And so as a nurse, what is your prescription for that happening?
There is no primarily everything that was off limit was open.
Well, I can't thank you enough for talking to us here today. I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate everything you did.
I think the biggest struggle was when we started breaking blocks for us to move in. We had a hard time trying to get decent homes, even to buy them. We couldn't buy them.
So how did you change that?
I worked faithfully with a little real estate friend of mine whose name was out. She was a hard-working. She would organize, would call at night and say, we're going to try to break 43rd or 45th, and we need workers. And I would immediately get ready to go out the next day with my walking shoes and my rain hat or whatever. We would go and knock on the doors of that particular block that she had chose for us to work. Sometimes we were received, and most times we were not. Someone would tell us they don't want. We would ask them if you want to sell your house, and they would tell us, no, you're not selling. Oh yes, they were willing, whichever ones.
You said you put on your walking shoes. What were those shoes? What did they look like?
They were boots, soft boots. I always wore little boots.
So why was it important for you to have on comfortable shoes when you did that?
Because we really walked. She would park us in the middle of the block or on the corner of a particular block, and then we would get out and walk the block, knocking on one door after another.
And how many houses were you able to turn in those efforts?
I can't say, but I can say we turned a lot of blocks from from 34th Street down. But primarily the blocks were Western Parkway, Northwestern Parkway, 41st, Greenwood, all the way down to the park.
I just can't tell you how grateful I am that you told that story. And I think that people don't realize that it just takes a lot of shoe leather to make that kind of change. How long did you keep your boots, and do you have them still?
I still have them.
Could we get a picture of them?
I wouldn't know where to start looking. Oh boy, it's gonna take a minute on that one.
Why did you keep them?
Because they were good and comfortable, and I knew I would need them.
But after all these years, when you're not really doing that anymore, you still kept your boots, your walking shoes.
I imagine I did.
Has anybody ever told you that you are a hero?
No,
Would that make you uncomfortable?
yeah, I wasn't a hero. I was just out there working.
Is that about the best any of us can do?
Each of us got a journey, and each of us has to do our part. Some have to run fast and some are slow walking, but we all have to be patient and do a lot of praying and a lot of singing.
I asked you before if you would sing one of those songs for us, and you seemed a little taken aback by that. Are you willing to sing one of your protest songs that you can remember now?
Somebody back there gonna help me.
You know I can't sing.
Uh,
I can't even.
Which one you gotta sing?
See, this is where you need your daughter.
yeah,
She's wrong with voice.
yeah.
This is where you need your daughter.
We shall overcome. I think primarily everybody sung that one. We sang that one a lot at a lot of places.
You want us to help you sing that one?
Yeah.
We
Shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Someday. I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Christ is on our side. Christ is on our side. We shall overcome someday.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I can't sing my dog.
I think you did just fine. Thank you, Ms. Glass.